Welcome to the Hair Loss Show, where Dr. Russell Knudsen and Dr. Vikram Jayaprakash discuss issues relating to hair loss and the medical and surgical treatment of hair loss in both men and women.
Hi everybody, welcome back to the Hair Loss Show. I'm Dr. Russell Knudsen.
And I'm Dr. Vikram Jayaprakash.
Thank you very much for those of you who do subscribe, but there are many that don't, that watch the videos. We'd like to encourage you to subscribe because it helps lift our profile, and that means more people will get to see the videos. And the feedback we're getting is that they are helpful, and we want to get this message out to as many people as possible. So if you can hit the subscribe button, that would be very helpful to us. And thank you very much for those of you who have already done so.
Great. So today's topic, all right, is probably, and we've covered some of this in various forms in previous videos, but I thought it was probably worthwhile sort of coming back to it, because there's been lots online with people sort of professing new stacks of treatment options that they can take to prevent hair loss. And I think the more information that's available, the better, as long as it's sort of well-founded. But one of the things that we're seeing people going, right, okay, you know what, part of my treatment regime is to combine saw palmetto and finasteride with a variety of other things as well. I might add is that there's a long list of things that includes things
biotin,
like biotin, caffeine, and people talk about rosemary oil and all of these sort of things that people are sort of incorporating into their sort of treatment protocol. But I thought I'd pick out these two and kind of pick your brain as to what your thoughts are. We know about finasteride. It's been used a lot. It's probably a big sort of ticket item in terms of managing androgenic alopecia, certainly in men. But people are saying, right, okay, well, there's saw palmetto, which is a natural product. I can combine the two. What are your thoughts?
Okay, so the herb Serenera ripens, which is saw palmetto, has been around since the 1880s.
Yes.
And initially it was given to people to boost their sex drive, believe it or not. So the idea was like, we use this herb and it presumably through the boost in testosterone that you got from it. And where we first saw it coming into managing hair loss was in the non-medical clinics, because the non-medical clinics couldn't use prescription medicines, so they didn't have a doctor on the premises, right? So they would say, okay, well, there's evidence that saw palmetto blocks DHT production because it blocks the enzyme. And so they would do it, and they'd say, oh yes, like if you use finasteride, you get side effects, but if you use saw palmetto, you don't. Now that's an interesting distinction, because if you're claiming that saw palmetto or any product has DHT blocking potential, then you need to understand that if it's not getting side effects, if you had a minimal amount of DHT blocking going on, you'd still be able to call it a DHT blocker, but would have no chance of having an effect in hair loss. So if we compare what we're talking about here, finasteride blocks about, if you measure it in the blood, about 2/3 of the conversion of testosterone to DHT. And that makes it effective without being greatly effective necessarily in everybody. Dutasteride, 90%. Saw palmetto's down in the 20 to 30% range, right? And basically, unless you get to, they've done these studies, unless you get to 55, 60% blockage, you get no clinical effect.
Yes.
Right, so for a medicine, for a natural product, a herbal product like this that's been around for 140 years, you'd think we'd have a pretty good idea by now whether saw palmetto actually had any effect.
Not a single study has proven that.
No, there are no studies that show that it's got comparable effects to anything else. And so, unfortunately, I mean, it falls into this category of I would rather use a natural product than use a synthetic product. But the reality is, just because it's natural doesn't make it work. And so, I don't mind my patients using it. If that's what they feel that they want to do, that's okay. But I'm very, very, evidence-based about it and say, look, this is not a new product. It's been around forever, and there's never, ever been any convincing evidence that it works as a standalone therapy. And when you mix it in with 5 other things and something's happening, right, then you're going, okay, well, saw palmetto is probably doing part of the deal. That's the problem. you can only really assess it if it's a standalone therapy, not when it's added into other things.
Yeah, and I think that's the problem with all these sort of modal treatment protocols where you don't know, well, okay, well, you've got an improvement. Well, what's the distribution of what's successful? Is it, 10%? Was it the saw palmetto? Was it 5% the finasteride? I think with regards to this, my feeling is that, okay, again, I don't mind my patients taking it, right? And that's fine. Do I think it's, are they best served by combining the two? I haven't seen any evidence to suggest that's the case. If they're taking finasteride, I think what I generally say is more than likely the saw palmetto is probably superfluous to requirements. I don't think the saw palmetto is necessarily giving you the ability to reduce the dose of finasteride that you're going to be able to take. And that also on the fact that we're always trying to give our patients the least dose of any medication that we're going to try to give them that will give them the outcome, and the outcome being stability.
So we're asking patients to take things for a long time.
Yeah.
And often the resistance comes from younger patients who are not used to taking anything. And this idea of, I've got to take this for the rest of my life. And that's not necessarily true, by the way. I say to my patients, there are people that will say, I'm 25 now and I hate it. But if I was 40, I wouldn't care. So do I have to take this the rest of my life? I'm going, well, no, if you don't care at 40, stop. Right? If you don't care anymore, just don't take it and let nature have its way with you. That's absolutely fine. So you've got permission to stop whenever you don't care. But if you care, you need to be doing something that's got evidence to produce. And as we've said over the years, the things that we prescribe don't stop working, but they're not necessarily 100% effective. So this applies to minoxidil, applies to finasteride. The drift off occurs in some patients, right? So at 5 years, maybe 2/3 of our finasteride patients are still stable. At 10 years, it might be 40% that are stable. But it really depends upon the degree of balding, in these patients. And so it's not that it loses its effectiveness, but it's only doing a partial block, not a complete block. And so if we use the analogy, which I often do with patients about it being leaking bucket syndrome, and leaking hair out of it, we're reducing the leak in these patients. We're just not necessarily abolishing it. That said, there are some people with very mild balding where it just abolishes it, and they've been taking finasteride for 25 years and they have the same head of hair that they had. So it doesn't stop working, but adding things to it doesn't necessarily help.
Yes. So I think the short thing is it's up to the individual what they want to be on, whether or not they want to add, we're talking specifically saw palmetto here.
It also applies to biotin and things like that. I mean, the true incidence of biotin deficiency is 1 in 30,000. So you're going to have a lot of people taking biotin without really any evidence that's going to have necessarily having an effect. But it's not necessarily harmful to do it. We're comfortable with it, but we wouldn't endorse it.
No, absolutely. Hope that answers that question. And thank you again for watching. And please remember to hit the subscribe button, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Thanks, everyone.